Today, we celebrate the feast of St. John the Theologian. St. John has 3 titles. He was one of the original 12 disciples. He was the brother of James, and both of them were the sons of Zebedee. So when you read in the Bible, James and John, sons of Zebedee, this is that John. And when you read in the Bible that Jesus took 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, that is this John. When you hear about the disciple whom Jesus loved, that was John. And John by trade was a fisherman, and he was not literate, which is why it's very ironic that he has the title theologian. There are only 3 saints in the Orthodox Church that have that title: St. John the Theologian, St. Gregory the Theologian, and St. Simeon the New Theologian, because they expounded, unlike anybody else, the truth of the gospel. Now, one of the things about John, as I said, was that he was not lettered. He didn't know how to read and write. And we have evidence of this in the gospel we just read. John was dictating the gospel and his universal letters and the revelation to a scribe named Prochoros. And you see evidence of editing in the gospel, because at the end of the gospel it says, "This is a disciple who's bearing witness to these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true." So if John was writing this with his own hand, he would have said, "I am the disciple. I'm bearing witness to these things, and the things I've written, I know that they're true." The evidence of the first person plural indicates another person was participating in this, which is why many times we don't, not in this icon of St. John, but in other icons, especially in the study Bible, if you have a study Bible and you thumb through there, there's a full-page icon of St. John, and in the corner you see a scribe that's taking notes. And so the lesson of John with this is that Jesus can use anybody, even someone who's not lettered and unlearned, to be the greatest of the theologians. You don't have to go to a seminary or have a college degree or be able to even read and write in order to witness for Christ. St. John was the only one of the original 12 disciples that was not martyred. He actually died a natural death in exile on the island of Patmos in the year 100. John was 95 when he died, making him the youngest of the 12 disciples. St. John wrote the gospel of his name, 3 universal letters, and also the book of Revelation. In the epistle, which I love this passage of the epistles, I wish we would read it more often. It's relegated to these days of St. John. Today and May 8th are the 2 feast days of St. John. We read that God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. So where you have fear, you cannot have love. They don't coexist. And where you have love, you don't have sin. They don't coexist. So sin is actually a failure to love. And if we focus on love, then we will sin less. If we focus on peace and less on fear, we will have love. If you have a relationship, and there are many people who have relationships where there is a lot of fear. Children fear their parents, spouses fear each other, co-workers fear the boss. If you have fear in the equation, then there can't be love, because these 2 things cannot coexist. And I love the way that St. John puts that so succinctly. God is love, and whoever abides in love abides in God, whether they know it or not. Whether they know it or not. Every loving expression is a godly expression. And then going to the gospel lesson, it's very short, and it talks about the relationship of John with the Virgin Mary. And at the cross, the Virgin Mary was standing there, and only John was there. In fact, you can see on the icon of the crucifixion, especially when you leave, there's 2 figures on the right side of the icon. One is the centurion, who later became a Christian, and the other one is St. John the Theologian. And we know a couple of things from this encounter. Number 1, Joseph, the protector of Mary, was no longer in the picture, because Jesus entrusted his mother to his disciple John. Had Joseph been alive, there would have been no need to do that. And secondly, many people point to this interaction as the establishment of the church. Some people will say the church was established on Pentecost with the grace of the Holy Spirit, but in some sense, the church was established on Good Friday when Jesus told his mother, "Behold your son," meaning behold the church. And he told John, representing the church, "Behold your mother, the Virgin Mary, and your mother, the church." And finally, John writes at the end of his gospel, "There are many other things which Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose the world itself could not contain the books that would be written." John's gospel actually has two endings. This is the last of the endings. This is the end of the gospel. But one chapter before, John writes, "These things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and believe that you may have life in his name." So there are actually two endings to the gospel in consecutive chapters. But the point is that no matter how much knowledge we have about God, our knowledge is not going to be exhaustive. The world itself could not contain the books that would be written about God and God's love. That being said, we shouldn't despair, like, how can I ever master all of this? This epistle lesson especially gives us something very small to master. The idea that God is love and that fear and love do not coexist, and sin and love do not coexist. And if you didn't understand anything else of the Bible, if you understood those 20 words, there's no fear and love, there's no love cannot exist with fear, there is no sin and love, they don't coexist, and God is love, and whoever abides in God is going to have the love of God. If you understood nothing else other than that, you would understand what it is to be a Christian. And if you could live that, you would master what it means to be a Christian. Please stand. Again, we bow before you and